the market doesn't accept it. So what do we do with that? So Dave, if you want to go back. Some of you know, at one point we were entertaining some plans that we thought, well, gosh, that'd be a great place to transfer some of those apartments that we were walking away from in the Springs vesting, and maybe we should slide those over, and maybe that would mean we could add more units to the plan. And we quickly realized that's a bad idea. We're not without our mistakes. So we're not asking for that. We actually are really excited about the proposal that we have in front of you today, which is to turn that area into a business park that would be an incubator for growing companies. It would be a place to do some flex office, a lot of retail, storefronts, some Class A, some Class B, some medical office, and really encourage a place that is for the 3,200 homes that are moving in and your other residents to live and work in Saratoga Springs.
You mentioned earlier light industrial. Is that something you're also looking at?
Yeah, I qualify that though because we're not looking for, so we just announced last week in one of our other projects to the west, Pole Canyon, that Tyson Foods is coming in, right? That's manufacturing. That's not, we don't feel like that would be an appropriate.
You mentioned light manufacturing. So are you looking at like where the semi-trucks can come in from behind, it has like the little storefront in front?
Yeah.
Or assembly manufacturing?
Yes, but everything that would be occurring would be inside a building.
Right.
And non-impactful to surrounding use.
Redwood there. Yeah.
Flex space, yeah. So yeah.
I know flex is the new term, but because people don't like using the word industrial, but it is light industrial.
Yeah.
And it seems like that would be an appropriate use there.
I'm glad to hear you say that.
Better than a bunch of apartments that would become not so appealing to very many people, especially surrounded by a freeway.
Yeah.
Well, I think the biggest thing is it gives us the jobs, so we're not having to use the freeways as much, right?
Yeah, and then the freeway is getting used at different times for people to come to work and things
Right.
like that. So instead of everyone leaving the city, some people actually can be coming southbound on the freeway.
Use both sides
Yeah.
at once?
What?
Providing a reason for the reverse flow traffic.
I'm not a fan. I'm like, go look up in Salt Lake County where you put apartment complexes on, Bangor, or you put them on 215. They really become, I hate to say it, but slums. Really bad areas for monitoring and policing because no one really wants to live there. So I'm much more in favor of something like
this. That's great to hear. It's good feedback. We obviously have details to work out on what that all means.
Economies of scale because your neighboring landowner south a little bit is also looking at putting their business park. So similar to what you see at Thanksgiving Point and Silicon Slopes, it's not all Thanksgiving Point anymore. It's spreading out and it's becoming a true focal point, a business draw. Between your proposals, if you would, and then the SLR landowner looking at doing their business park just slightly south, you're creating that same kind of economy of scale and
100%.
and draw. So.
I completely subscribe to if you build it, they will come, and the bigger you build the pie, the more we can attract the right
And the more space you have,
people to come and do
and
it.
being on a large freeway helps.
Well, we find the positive in things, right?
Yeah, I mean, you got stuck with the freeway, so let's use it.
It is what it is. So overall, as we look at kind of a comparison between what is approved today and what we're proposing, no additional units, additional open space, providing the military, Camp Williams, with what they've requested to our best ability, finding job creation, adding home designs, being sensitive to the topography of the ground. That's the other thing that I didn't totally touch on, but if you remember from our existing plan in Wildflower, there's some changes here. Village Plan 3A, which is right in the middle of the turn of the Mountain View corridor as it comes through Wildflower. Yeah, you can see those lots laid out. That's 3A that you have already approved. That kind of use extends to the north. We heard loud and clear that in order to do that, we were going to be mass grading that site down significantly.
You're in the hills, I mean.
And what we're proposing with this plan is we've looked at topography and we've heard loud and clear, please don't cut that hill to nothing, is that we're actually proposing that we move that up further north. So that product type goes further north where it will be less impactful to the existing topography. And we're going to be able to leave that hill up higher and actually create some really cool view lots and some areas where people will feel comfortable in building a bigger, nicer home that they spend more money on up higher.
He's moving to have the more dense stuff, and then he's putting houses on the hill.
Yeah,
Did I summarize that well for you?
please, yes, perfect. So, overall, again, the proposal that we're working on with your staff increases the open space by 100 acres. It doesn't ask for any additional units. It removes the most dense part of the Springs vesting, and it, we think, provides a better market-accepted use for the regional commercial designation for this business park that'll bring jobs, all of which we're super excited about. Are we going in the right direction?
So far.
Where's the other shoe to drop, right?
We're waiting. So this looks great. Obviously, upping even your own open space number, and then taking a much lower open space, and then a combined, even greater open space. How can we argue that? You went
Well,
from 30 for one, 19 for the other, and 34
There's only one way
combined.
that I can argue so far, and that's, as I was going through, happened to notice that they now are allowing for 5 feet between buildings instead of a minimum of 10 feet. That makes me really nervous on your setbacks. There are some things like that that we definitely are going to have to talk about, because there's no way I will ever approve only 5 feet between buildings. That's just ridiculous.
You can shake hands.
Fair enough. And maybe that's,
To be honest, fire code won't allow it either. So
Well, yeah, it's a 10-foot minimum fire code,
You
so,
can actually do 6, but you have to spend a lot of money to do 6.
and you can't ever have windows, and you can't,
Anyway.
yeah.
So,
You did the firewall.
You're not gonna see a lot of
The
pushback.
outlet
It's
has
so
to be-
expensive
I don't think
to
they're
do it.
arguing with you.
Good.
They agree.
So anyway, some things we just need to.
for those of you who don't know, Brian Flam, my partner, is here.
I don't think the mayor recognized him to speak.
Delete the comment.
I'm looking at, everything you've showed us so far
So far
is very
is all the
appealing.
plus so
You-
far.
Right.
We want job creation. You're never gonna get an argument from
Yeah.
us to create job creation. You're accommodating our neighbor who wants more space. You're putting in a cemetery that we have residents clamoring for. All of these things, we just now want to get to the next part.
Great.
Well, I will say one more thing if I can. One concern I do have about where the cemetery, where the open space is you're leaving that, I'm gonna call it the northwest corner, where their actual shrapnel zone is, in housing. And that doesn't make any sense. So, literally, we would put on every single title, every single parcel, make them sign waivers and everything else. Your house is in the shrapnel zone. I'm gonna call it that. That's not what they
So
call
their
it.
shrapnel goes on private property?
Yes.
How can they legally do that?
Because it's the way the state is and the way it's been done and everything else. It's what it is. It's not, it doesn't
don't have
happen
to
on a regular
compensate
basis.
them?
It doesn't happen on a regular basis, but this is their warning zone. That's one of the things
I'm shocked that,
yeah.
I thought we were concerned with
That's
state, but I
the
guess-
first I've ever heard of that. Kemp Williams has never brought that up with us. Maybe there's a liability
Because
reason
their
for them
firing
not
zone, their
bringing
firing
it
zone
up.
is
but-
right off that corner. You can see it on all of the maps.
So how come Kemp Williams hasn't told you that that's a concern?
I don't
They
know.
have.
They've told you that, they have not told you that those homes in that corner is a problem.
They have.
They have indicated that they would prefer no homes above that north black line, and that they're concerned about any homes there. And we're doing our very best to say, we get it. We purchased property with a vesting that has homes there, and we're doing everything we can to figure out how to lessen the impact.
Right, and I understand that. Having talked over this with Camp Williams and with the ACUB and all the different entities that are concerned about this, the main area of concern is that northeast corner of the Springs.
That one.
That from there probably to where, there's like a little black thing in the middle, that rectangle is the most concerning part. There's a road where they transport explosives along that fence. They are constantly moving military equipment along that fence. There's it is currently it has a historical flow off of that area, and so everything above that area is subject to being flooded, and that it's historical, so they can't and won't need to mitigate that. That's something that you'll have to mitigate on your side. So that's why I have a lot of concerns. The other concern is putting the cemetery at that end where you have it. It's extremely steep. I'm not sure we'd be able to mow the lawn if we had our cemetery there.
So you're right, there is a hill there. I don't have a topography map with me tonight, but
I'm looking
where
at-
the cemetery is
I'm looking at one from
proposed
some of the report, and it's
is,
I've been told it's not suitable for a cemetery.
great. I met with camp last week on Friday, and I showed them where we were proposing it. They told me they were comfortable with it. So, again, the details, we're trying to
I'd
figure
like
out.
to confirm that with camp before we move forward.
Hyman reached out to me yesterday and just let me know that they were in Washington DC and could not attend the meeting, but they would be happy to provide follow-up comments.
So, council member, I'm all ears. How do we change it?
Well, I mean, there's lots of, first off, I want to congratulate you. Most of this, I'm in favor with. The change to business park, I think is great. And I think the fact that you came in with the same density or the same number of units across the entire development, instead of asking for an increase in that, is good. I appreciate your efforts.
I can't turn the screen, by the way.
That's fine. I appreciate your efforts with the
Pushing the
150-foot
button.
barrier. I realize that that's a valiant attempt. I'm not sure it's adequate. You are within your rights to develop that land, but we will, I will fight to make sure that those homeowners are aware of what they're buying into.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we put notes on plot. I mean, we put them next to our ballpark. We put stuff saying the lights are going to be on late. These people need to know that there's a firing point within 200 feet of their home, and that their windows are going to rattle when they do firing exercises from that point. They need to know that there's going to be heavy trucks moving along that fence behind their house, and they need to know that they may be flooded if it rains. So I mean, I understand your issue, and I'm willing to work with you if we need to move houses off of that to a different location. I mean, I understand you have some vested rights, and I want to make sure that you receive those vested rights. But I also want to make sure that we're not putting future residents of our city, in a situation where because they're not gonna come yelling at you. They're gonna come yelling at the city. Why did you approve a house with all these problems?
To be fair, they'll probably yell at both of us.
They'll yell at you for a while, but eventually it'll just be the city's
But I hear
problem.
you. Maybe you could help give me some ideas in expanding the box.
Well, I mean, honestly, so you've taken out all the apartments and condos, which on one hand is great, but also this is one of those areas where maybe you take that particular area and you do put an apartment complex down there near that business zone or whatever it is, so you still have that. It would be okay to have some higher density next to that kind of an area where they could literally walk across the street to work or whatever it might be. But that would also then take those units out of that firing zone. And I don't usually advocate for that, but
Sure.
that's one of the things you do is you do sometimes intensify the density in a very small area in order to facilitate something like that.
Well,
If I
and
remember correctly, didn't we have a higher density down against the gravel
We
pit
did.
area too? So you could even,
Yeah.
maybe there's an opportunity.
Well, and there's a
to put-
slightly high, he's got a slightly higher density right now, he's got some townhomes and whatnot. in
I
there.
believe the gravel pit is
But maybe
industrial
we
zone,
make
right?
that denser, blocking, so it sort of almost buffers industrial zone, higher intensity homes. And
Yeah.
then, so again, taking the ERUs off of, to your point, the fire.
So
Fire
here's the
regulators.
underlying issue that I have to deal with. It's my reality.
Right.
My reality is where I understand and I completely recognize that you see ERUs. At the end of the day, this all boils down to a spreadsheet with numbers on it for me, and those numbers represent revenue and value. And where I have a third acre or a half acre lot, that's a view lot, I have to be able to figure out a way to get the same value
Out of an apartment,
out of that in whatever I do.
condo.
It's just the reality of my world.
Right.
And so when I hear that, I get really nervous because what I hear is, thank you for not asking for more density. But if I don't get more units, I can't sell an apartment door for the same price or value that I can sell a third acre or half acre lot for.
Well, but the density you reduce, could you just take that back and add more, put that density back, but put it down? Because you reduce your, like, you kept your density.
I'm still at 3238. That was the number of units that we had, and so if I ask for, if I move a lot, and I capped at that 3238 number, and I don't ask for any more, then that now just becomes, if I take one lot off the top area of sensitive, and I move it down, and I have to split that area with another lot, now those two lots are half the size of each other.
Well, I mean, I
You
speak
also-
as one.
I was gonna say,
but
you also have
maybe-
less infrastructure costs,
But
though.
maybe as one person, maybe you do have more ERUs, and maybe that's the compromise, and then I think we have to look at these things, but what, I mean, I guess what is, I mean, not that you're gonna give your secret sauce away, because that's not fair either, but like,
Well,
how many?
I'll play an open book with you.
How many condos or apartments, like, is it 3-to-1, 2-to-1, 4-to-1? Like, what are we talking about? Because I have two council members on here who are very concerned about this area, and rightfully so. As they describe it, it scares me,
100%.
right?
I'm not gonna, you are right on.
So then where's the compromise? Because
Right.
you obviously have a right to put homes there if you want. We're saying not to, so as a council, are we okay with maybe allowing him a little bit more higher density along that industrial rock mining facility? I don't know, maybe that's part of the compromise, because I don't think it's fair for us to say to you, oh yeah, just reduce your density by more, or I just said how bad it is to have apartments down by a freeway, I don't really want that, or just put apartments somewhere else or whatever. But what you're saying is a lot, and to your point, you've always argued this, bigger lots, we want more of them, are worth more than a condo. So I don't think it's fair for me to come in and just say, I want you to get rid of all this beautiful single-family home views that happen to be in a shrapnel zone that you could have charged for, as a full lot, and not get anything for that. So I'm willing to look at a compromise on that situation.
It's really good to hear. We actually, as Bruce pointed out, anticipated this being exactly why we're here tonight. We know this is sensitive, and we've kind of anticipated that this is kind of where we've gotten to, and we're stuck. And so we really appreciate that feedback, and
I mean, I think there's lots of different opportunities to make sure that you're made whole on this. I mean, in my discussions with ACUB, they're willing to pursue a conservation easement, which would involve you being paid at least partially for that land. And that would allow, that would help pay for some of that loss you're seeing in some of these units.
just so I can bring you all up to speed on where we stand with that conversation, because we've spent 18 months with ACUB and working with Paul, and he actually had the head of the ACUB program out about a month ago. She walked the site.
I was in a meeting with her.
So Paul has told us that we're the first group to have brought, a proposal to them to say, this is what we can do. We had the property appraised at a bare minimum under the entitlements, and we reduced that value down to less money than we can sell that for out in the market today, trying to figure out how to make this work. And the message we got back was the demands on ACUB are significant, that the ability for the military to commit to buy this through that program is hindered because they have to look at their big picture, and if they commit the funds here, they didn't ever come back and say your value's not right. They just came back and said, based on the vesting of what you have and the value that's created because of that, which we got to pay for, their monies would have to come here 100% for years.
Right.
disabling their ability
And
to look at the rest of the picture.
You can correct me if I'm wrong. I was told that the appraisal was for like 12 or 14 million or somewhere in that ballpark. It was a larger than just the square we're talking about. It was that whole upper
Yeah,
portion.
it was everything north of that black line.
That black line. And I know that pencils out to be pretty expensive. You mentioned it, that includes all the entitlements and everything like that. I mean, what the conservation easement would be to pay for the land as it is now, fallow land, and then we would be talking about moving the density off so that they're not paying for the density and the infrastructure and.
So on that point, and I think that there's many different concepts that get woven into this. You know, for example, conservation easements typically address a business's desire to take, credits on taxes and things of that nature, as well as, kind of building it into a long-term financial pro forma. And I think that the applicant is very aware of that. Transferring density, as they've expressed earlier, is not necessarily, not all doors are created equal from an economic standpoint. And the question becomes, okay, if they're transferring their density to a different type, they would be asking for some consideration of increasing that density in some way or another. And so it kind of comes down to the complex formula of how do we make it work. And ACUB is one potential funding source, and I think what the applicant is kind of asking for is there other tools that are available in order to make the economic equation balance out for their interests and our interests as a community. Roundabout, that's the simplification of what we're talking about.
Mr. Porter, my name is Bruce Baird. I'm counsel for the project. I was counsel for the Springs. One of the things I've done in the past in similar kinds of situations is sort of defer this decision, and that is we could put a provision in the development agreement saying that if by XYZ date we have QRS funding mechanism to remove this density, then we will remove the density. If we don't have that funding mechanism by QRS date, then we'll go forward with A, B, and C type of options. And there are ways to cleverly do that, and we can make, as part of the development agreement proposal, we can make some proposals for, I hope it's not politically incorrect, but for Chinese menus, for how to deal with those eventualities in the future. Because we recognize that it's hard to plan the future, but we can put those kinds of options in there that will actually give us all the incentive and the ability to square the circle in the maximum way that meets all of our legitimate objectives.
And I think that's great. I mean, it's tough because, you're coming to us saying, well, how can we make this work? And it's kind of hard in this format to say, well, I mean, I don't really know how much you need to make it work. I don't know,
That's more than fair.
and so, I mean,
We'll make you the proposals. We just wanted to get the issue out. As I said, we anticipated, as Nate said, we drew a map when we were meeting last week with exactly the section that you were talking about and said, this is the exact section we're going to need. And we just wanted to understand that you had some flexibility in recognizing the value for value trade-off versus vesting versus your legitimate need. And once we've crossed that Rubicon, we will make you proposals.
okay.
Can I interject? We've listened to you an awful long time. No, I'm kidding. I'm just joking, not really, but
Listen to
anyway.
me longer. I'd be happy to be quiet.
Yeah, that's good. Could you go back to the screen that shows the line at the buffer that Camp Williams wants? This kind of reminds me, it's a little bit different scenario, but we were dealing with a mining company, and they had the shock wave, and they wanted this massive buffer. Was it you?
No, that was when we approved the Springs.
Oh, is this the same thing?
Yeah, it was the mining company, where's the cursor?
We don't have one.
Well, okay, that's great.
The mining cursor down below here, they wanted 1,000-foot buffer to the north.
So this was it, and I think we just said, this buffer that you're proposing is ridiculously large.
Yeah.
Now, I think what Camp Williams, and I'm bringing this up because I think this is something that we should consider, Camp Williams has drawn this line, I'm sure there's some studies behind it, but if we're trying to work with them too, I don't know that I'm committed to transferring that density plus whatever X unit for that entire space. So let's look at like half of it.
Right.
Does that make sense what I'm saying? Like, if we're trying to negotiate or work out a density transfer plus, I call it density transfer plus, if that makes sense, is shrinking that buffer, it gives them something, but we don't need to eat into the entire thing. I know that's
I
their
agree.
optimal desire of what they're looking for, but same with that blasting, or not blasting.
Let's blast it.
Yeah.
We'd run the box, 4 different boxes for them originally. And Paul, so I'd run it as just that box, and then box plus about halfway, sections saying, hey, we're fine with any of the above, we're just trying to, obviously this is lesser, and they went straight to, we want all of it. But we'd run each of them saying,
And they
hey,
have
we
the
don't care if you buy any
No,
or.
I'm familiar with that, and to be clear, this line isn't necessarily the buffer they're asking, this was the land that they were willing to explore buying.
Which to me
It
means,
wasn't necessarily that it was.
Okay, but-
Because it's a buffer.
yeah, so beside the point, if they're willing to buy it, it means they're buffer. Whether they officially meant to designate it or not, that's what they have now designated. And where I'm going with that is for me, if Camp Williams isn't at the table, I'm not willing to eat it all up through density transfer plus, right? Because it's not equal value to accommodate that. Do we need to be a good neighbor? Sure, whatnot, but shrinking that in half or even 2/3, I think would get them a better buffer, and that's something that maybe would work better with your plans versus trying to, the whole thing.
Right, well, and that's what I was talking about, just that one corner is the
And to be
main
fair,
focus.
just like it's tough for us on a big subdivision to have all 30-acre lots to absorb it, we don't want all townhomes and apartments either. Having a different mix
mixture.
helps us move through it better. So we don't really want to move them all off, just, we're willing to work.
Yeah, so I mean, Councilman Porter said just that one corner, if everyone can see my imaginary
Well, if you
finger.
go back to the other one, it's easier for me to.
Well, I have a real finger and an imaginary
Go,
finger.
that one. I'm talking about, there's like that black thing in the middle of the green.
House up there.
I don't know what you're talking about, the,
Black thing in the middle is a large park.
There you go.
Those are zip lines and climbing towers.
Okay,
and-
so
so from that park over to
From the
the
park over.
northeast corner.
So about.
From where it says Camp Williams buffer,
Okay, Mark, there's 3 entities in this, and one of them's not here. Would Camp Williams, if we did another work session soon, be willing to be at the table for this discussion?
I'm sure they
Because
would.
right now, we're speculating on what we say Camp Williams said, what they told you.
I have no.
I think we need them at the table.
Representation in saying they'd be willing to come and talk with us. And ultimately, their input will be important. I think tonight, if we could just understand what their ask is and then come back with that additional piece of information and use that then for your decision-making process.
and I think I'm willing to express that I'm willing to work with you to make sure that we can make this work, both for all 3 parties involved.
And the
May,
basic,
would you be opposed on this
Sorry, Mayor.
portion to set up a time to meet with Camp Williams and you and us all together in a work session?
No, not at all. I think that'd be great.
And if you could come prepared with that third section, what that transfer will be, you probably already have some ideas, but if not, like the number of homes, how many, what's the plus necessary?
See what you need.
Know that you're not gonna be a straight across, we're gonna have.
So there's a couple of key things that I want to still get to tonight, and that is, one, we have been patiently working through this process for a couple of years now. We really need to be able to move forward with the plan. So this proposal that Bruce has brought of the Chinese menu, for lack of a better term, if we can help give direction to staff to continue to move forward with our application, knowing that, let's set a date, let's get in and figure this out. I just can't, I'm going to be forced into a situation, if I don't keep moving forward, that you're going to be hearing from me saying, we're back to the Springs and we just got to roll with what was there. And none of us want that. So
I think you heard from the council that we're willing to work with you.
Great.
So let's get that menu, that I'll drop the first
But
part
let's
of
hear
it.
the rest of your,
But so if you can help me continue to move forward with our application now.
Continue to move forward,
Okay.
I'm willing to meet.
Great.
I personally will meet, if we have to have an extra session, I'll have an extra session because we lose sometimes with splash and things. I want this to be a success.
Awesome.
I like this plan better than the Springs and Wildflower separate. I think it makes more sense. And let's just make it work. But we need to get to Mayor's point, he makes a really good point. Let's stop saying, this person said this, I don't believe that this said, they would have said that. Let's actually get the people in the room so that we can actually have them on the record too.
Perfect.
To help with the solution.
Yeah, and they can be a
Do
part
you
of the
have
solution.
dates tonight that you can propose to us, or do you want us to
Can
work
I,
with your?
yeah, well, sorry to interrupt, but before you go back, I know Councilman Porter said where that red line is a third. I would be fine based upon topography and how the roads line up, shifting it even further. I'm pointing this direction because that's how I'm looking at it, but if you look at the other direction.
He's saying maybe the box is a little smaller even.
I just,
I tell you what, when we come to you, we'll come with the flexibility to say, if we do this, this is what it means, and if we
Yep.
put the line here, then this is what
That'd
it
be
means.
great.
Trajectory of where they're really shooting.
right.
And then you gotta look at the shrapnel
Yeah, and they've
again.
got-
So for me, and we don't have all the answers to Mayor's point, I totally recognize that. It's a very valid, great suggestion. Thank you, Mayor. But for me, like, if the city is bearing the brunt of it through density plus transfers, I want that area shrunk as possible, as much as possible within that little blasting corner.
And then if
Fair enough.
ACUB, is it ACUB? Is that- If they want more, then they can come to the table as well.
I think they need to come to the table
They would come to the
with some mix, not just all us.
Yeah.
Well, and I think.
'Cause
the
I like
state-
this.
State would also be, if the state is buying a veterans cemetery, they would also be able to participate in with some funds, so.
So I think that there's
So-
lots of opportunities.
Yeah.
Back to Nate's question, there's next Tuesday, which is just after Memorial Day, or we have the first Tuesday in June, which is our next scheduled meeting.
Are you able to
Would you want
contact
the
Camp Williams
fourth?
to see when they're available?
Yeah, we need to
I mean,
communicate
we
with
can't
them.
really plan.
You're out the 4th, aren't
That
you?
you can get this
Yeah,
done
I-
next Tuesday.
That would be very
The
difficult.
4th of June,
4th of June would be great.
we need to ask Camp Williams.
If they're available.
Yeah, I'm just going to point out, I will not be here, so good luck to all of you in figuring
Okay.
this out.
We'll have Owen take the beating for you.
Yeah,
Where you're flat.
so.
That means the meeting will go much faster.
So-
We know Mark just talks and talks and talks.
So,
There's no sewer involved.
Mark, when you see this stuff come forward, I would appreciate though, like, if you can give us some insight of what you're thinking, even though you won't be here, if you could provide us some insight based on what's being proposed. Thank you. You're not
So-
off the hook, basically.
For work
The
session like
problem
we
is
did.
with that, Councilmember McComber, just so you're aware, I'm I'm essentially in this week and Tuesday next week, and then I won't be around. So I just want to be very clear on that. This is a long-standing family obligation, so
No, I'm okay with
If you could though, that'd be great.
I will try.
having Owen stand in.
We'll get the rest of their presentation.
So, okay, so we'll have a work session after the policy session on the 4th,
Possibly.
Would you want?
possibly, if Camp Williams can make it.
If you wanted, I mean, if they needed more time, the 11th, Mark, you're back by the 11th, aren't you?
We wouldn't have a meeting on the 11th unless you scheduled a special
You can do
meeting.
a
It
special
would
meeting.
be just a work session.
That's what you choose.
Would that
yes.
give you the time you need?
We can be ready the 4th.
The 4th.
We'll be ready the 4th.
We can be
If
ready the 11th.
Camp
We'll be ready to
Williams,
go.
but it doesn't do any good if Camp Williams isn't there.
That's why I'm saying either one.
And then we can always do a
Okay.
special session on the 11th if we need to.
We'll reach, I guess, Owen, since you'll be in, can you get with Camp Williams for the 4th or the 11th if they can't make the
4th is
4th?
ideal.
Okay,
Okay.
perfect.
The rest of your presentation, please. What else do you, because
We
we
have
haven't
one
heard
other
any
item.
asks.
one of
We haven't
Well,
heard
and
any
this is
asks
really
yet.
tied to us continuing to move forward, which I hope you understand we just have to do. Can you open that last attachment, the bonding exhibit? I'm not sure if you had a chance to talk about some of this in your work session, but in the areas that we are under construction and we are building, which have already been entitled and we're rolling forward, we have some significant master infrastructure that's currently on your CFP that we're looking to build this year. The amount of dirt that we're moving up there is great. The amount that we're going to be building is getting even greater. We're moving forward at a faster pace. So on this paper, on this exhibit here, we've identified the projects that we intend on building this year that are on your CFP, that are a part of what we need to develop for our project, but it also helps open up other parcels and properties for development in that northwest corner of your city. It totals $14 million. We would like to know the ability for us to do that in an SAA as a single bond with 5 different zones that identify the 5 different parts of those projects. We would use our land as collateral. We would work with the other property owners. They would pledge their pro rata share. So far, we have 100% participation from those landowners. But it's a large amount, and we want to make sure that we're going down the right path in that request.
I'll start since my microphone's on. I'm okay exploring that option. I think it's part of this discussion of how, in the past when we've done this, the partners that we've worked with have brought a lot to the table. We've done it with Edge, and they brought, 2 water tanks for the city. I recognize this is on the master plan, so they'll be bringing some facilities to the city. I think that's part of this
Absolutely.
discussion, this whole greater discussion. But I'm open to exploring that as one of the ways that we can help out.
Okay. Any other? Okay, great. That was all we were looking for.
It's absolutely
That's the other shoe,
doable.
that's it. I mean, there's
That's the only other shoe?
Tonight.
Perfect.
maybe Bruce will come up with something, but we know.
There's only 4 of you, so there should be 8 shoes, right?
I'm trying to be quiet.
Like, obviously, we're gonna try and help,
Thanks for the comments.
just as it looks like a true partnership, then it's easy for us to take it. So you understand where we're coming from.
I really hope you can see that we're trying to put our best foot forward on this. We didn't come and load
absolutely.
that corner with a bunch of density and say, well, now you should buy it from us. I mean, we're
Right.
not playing games.
And I
We
To be
really
honest,
are
it's
trying to be
actually
fair.
rewarding. It was actually, I'm quite pleased because to me, it looks like you want to partner with the city versus sort of shove things down. And that's, some in the past, we've had our moments because sometimes I felt like it was, you can't
Yeah.
stop me kind of thing versus, trust me, I can try.
Well,
And so now this feels, to me,
and
this feels
that's
like a
not the
partnership.
relationship we're
I know,
looking
this
for.
feels like a partnership and this is something I think I can work forward,
great.
going forward.
I think just from a planning standpoint, this is going in the right direction. We see that the need that, okay, if we're going to move those units off, they're great, and probably get some kind of density increase on that. But I would like to point out on page 18 of his slideshow, he was willing to put in 2-foot caliper deciduous trees.
I saw
So I
that.
think we should
I did
hold,
see that.
I think we should hold him to that.
2-foot caliber,
You
Nate.
said instead of 2 inches.
I did visit the Redwoods last year, so
Bringing them in.
I saw that.
Wait till you see the size of these things.
I knew that was a typo, but I love that.
Landscaping upgrade.
You're looking for
apparently
a
they're in a
one-of-a-kind in the
5-gallon
state. There you go.
I think you meant 2 feet of foliage. You
rainfall to support it.
meant 2 feet of
this year.
foliage at the top.
Okay, Mark,
Shelley will be out hugging every tree on your property.
You don't want to do that because all urban forestry studies say that 2-inch caliber is the optimal
No.
caliber and 2 feet.
We're just teasing.
2 feet die every time. We don't want 2 foot. They'll all die.
They can't handle the transfer.
So, Mayor and Council, one thing I wanted to point out that was brought up by staff earlier is that there was some concern in this, that it is also carving out in this particular document, it's carving out engineering standards and modifying engineering standards as opposed to using adopted city standards from an engineering perspective. We have concerns about that. Frankly, we have allowed for different standards in other developments, and it's proved to be very, very difficult for us to try and maintain. Our current recommendation would be that whatever you do relative to the community plan, it ties exactly to our adopted standards and not use community plan or the planned community zone as a way to backdoor amend our engineering standards. It becomes very difficult. We get inconsistencies and frankly, I believe that it was kind of a misinterpretation previously of the community plan, what the community plan should do. The community plan should give them flexibility in building their product and other things, but it shouldn't mean that every single engineering standard is then up for debate. And so I would suggest that that be something you consider.
I can list right now 5 different projects because we did that have really bit us horribly So I absolutely support
So
that.
again, from that concept, that was a discussion that was brought up by engineering earlier. I have not, gone through this application with that level of detail, but if that's something that you're consistent with or you have direction on, we would like to know so that we can give our feedback back to the applicant relative to
So
those issues.
is that where wildlife being brought in would stay at their standard and the springs would stay at
The springs would be adopted in at the current engineering standard for that portion of the project. Again, we're not trying to necessarily claw back everything, but we don't want multiple exemptions that
Are you
just get
talking mostly
proliferated.
street type stuff? Are you talking mostly?
For example, it seems like, and again, this is based on the evaluation I got, it seems like there's a lot of copy and paste from, say, Mount Saratoga that is just being put into our road standards, and we don't feel like that is a practice we'd want to perpetuate.
Okay.
So help us know what that means for the proposal going forward, because I'm
And
leaving
they'll
tonight
have-
with the expectation that we're going to continue forward with our application.
It won't stop anything, it just means that have LEI work with Gordon on what those standards are.
And when you say you want us to adopt the current city ordinances, but you also said if I heard you correctly, you also said we're not looking to claw back everything.
From Wildflower, we're
Yes.
not interested in perpetuating deviations from the engineering standards that have been adopted as of today's date.
Okay.
So the
that-
Springs is built to current city standards. Wildflower is vested under the previous vesting.
Is that true? Is the Springs vested to today's ordinances or yesterday's?
They were vested to 2015.
However, we are changing that right now with you adopting them into the PC zone. And what we don't want to do is perpetuate exceptions that were possibly granted it to the Wildflower or continue to make changes to those engineering standards. We would like to hold the standard on what our engineering standards are.
So we've really appreciated the relationship with your city engineer. I don't know of a better city engineer, to be honest, and I'm not just saying that to help win favor with Gordon. I really do appreciate our working relationship. Just understand that there are things that we're proposing within our current plan that we've worked with Gordon on, like road grades, that I don't know would fit within your existing ordinance, but because we've been under the Wildflower Community Plan, we've been able to have some variability in what we've been able to design to. So if we can just work.
The challenge we have with that, Nate, is we feel that because you have a community plan, it's opening up a debate on engineering standards. It's basically should be tied to the planning standards and what you're allowed to do within the planning realm and not bring into question all of the adopted engineering standards. So again, we can work on this as a case-by-case basis. And again, I'm wanting general philosophical direction from the council, and I'll let the engineers work through the specifics.
Well, another thing too is we have the system that we have to maintain, and changes are made to those systems over time. And locking in one particular development for something that may take 15, 20 years to develop isn't really the best use of city resources. So I guess what we're saying is let's have those exceptions be as limited as possible.
But in our first phase, we're
Otherwise
putting
not.
$14 million of master infrastructure in, and if in 3 years you decide to change your standard, and all of a sudden that's inadequate because you've decided to adopt another engineering standard, what are we supposed to do? If you don't lock us forward, the entire reason we do a master plan community, the entire purpose behind us going and saying, we will agree to build X, is that on the flip side, we get a standard from the city saying, we will allow you to build X. So how does that work?
Does it cut both ways? So for example, if we were to relax the standard, you're going to be in here saying, let us have the relaxed standard. So it kind of goes both ways, and I'm suggesting that let's have a conversation relative to that. This is probably not the night to do it. I'm just saying that what we are looking for from a staff perspective is direction from the council as to whether a community plan does in fact entitle you as the applicant to rewrite our engineering standards based on what you perceive is an easier standard for you to meet. Again, it's consistency. There's a lot of things that go into it, but if we reduce our standard, you bet you're going to be asking for the reduced standard. We're not going to keep pushing you to build a higher standard, so that needs to cut both ways.
And the way that the development agreement in the Springs worked and the way most of the development agreements that I've written work is that we agree upfront as to what's locked in, and if there are some flexibilities that we need upfront, and I don't want to go into, because there's hundreds of different flexibilities that you may need upfront, we negotiate and discuss those flexibilities upfront, write those and keep them as limited as possible, write them into the agreement and lock them in, and then we move forward so that we know what we're doing and we don't have problems. It's similar to the exact language, it's similar to the language that you put in the Springs Development Agreement is all we're talking about.
Like, so here's an example. This doesn't apply to your property, but say for instance, lock boxes. 7, 8 years ago, we added a standard in that required lock boxes for street lighting. So we didn't have people ripping off the wire. If you were locked in for 20 years or whatever, and the city came and adopted a standard for that.
That's one we were going to want to comply with.
Well, I'm just saying, as an example, that's an easy example. The harder examples are some of those street cross sections, right? So,
And there are provisions that I've written into the standard form development agreement that deal with those in case of changing, for example, federal standards or state standards or AASHTO standards or manual on uniform transportation standards. Those kinds of things, those are easy to deal with. And these are details. I agree with you, Mark. We can deal with these issues later.
Yeah, and I think the concern that was raised to me is Mount Saratoga never governed Wildflower or the Springs. And for there to be a copy and paste of those standards into this document, that seems a gratuitous example that would benefit you exclusively and go contrary to our current standards.
And I apologize, I should have had in writing, I'm pretty sure I delivered a verbal disclaimer that that's meant as a starting point.
Okay.
And we're anxious to get feedback on those. LEI is the engineer that we use. LEI did Mount Saratoga, and I told Greg, hey, we're going to have to get into the guts of this stuff. So let's have a starting point, and then let's sit down, as we've always done, and we're trying to do on all of our other issues, and work it out.
And I think that's great. Again, for the council, for clarification, we as staff are not recommending a renegotiation of our current adopted standards. If there are specific issues that we have to address to make it work, we would be fine in entertaining that in specific instances, but a carte blanche rewrite is not something that we'd be interested in recommending to you.
I mean, generally, we don't have engineering standards in our development agreements unless there's something specific that we need
Right.
to address.
And
So
and
it
again,
makes sense.
this is a very brief conversation. We've not had a chance to analyze it. And I agree with Nate, let us work through that. But again, I wanted to get your policy direction, and I'm hearing that you want our current standards to stand and then deal with exceptions as necessary.
Well, I like dealing with the exceptions as necessary because there's been other developers that's brought things up that some of them not so great. I won't use those examples that we didn't go with, but some of them brought like a new road design that is a pretty good thing for the city. So we just need to look at them. So I agree with you, Mark, but on the same side too is like case by case, yeah.
I mean, they have to have some sense of, I mean, financially, you can't just have no security because, I mean, to be honest, we want to lose more power to the state because the developers, if cities are continually increasing the standard and they don't give the developer any kind of control or protection, then the state's going to take away development approval from the cities.
Yeah.
Because that's where the threats have been. And so I get it. I definitely think that they need to be able to know what their costs are going to be. And I get, Kevin, where you're saying 20 years might be too long, but at the same time, they need to have some semblance of financial ability to predict their cost.
Absolutely.
And at the same time, meet our current standard. So I personally think that if we come in and say, this is our standard as a city, meet that, and I would be okay saying that if it increases, that they would be vested, and if we decrease our standard, I have no problem with them coming in and saying, you decrease your standard. I know it seems one way, but for me, if we're saying you have to meet our standards, so no variance, if we're gonna be hard-nosed on that, then I also think that we also need to give them protection that if our standard increases again, so hopefully we've done our job, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Right, and again, our point is really more focused on this, that our city code should be our adopted standard, should be the baseline, not some other development agreement
I agree with that.
as the
And
baseline.
if we do that as the baseline, then we can maybe give you some of the sense of security. Because I don't know one development agreement that has not been extended by this city council in my entire tenure.
I would
So they
just.
get an extension without any change, like literally just, you had 10 years, here's 10 more, done.
I would
And
just,
like-
I would just point out that both these development agreements are vested in 2015 standards, and both of them are fairly long fused. And we're certainly willing to sit down and talk with the city about which standards apply. There's not, and Mark, we do apologize again if there was a perception that there was an attempt to, a wholesale adoption of non-2015 development standards. The intent is to work with the city on what standards are appropriate and what deviations are necessary to allow the project to develop as it was contemplated on a value-for-value kind of basis while meeting the legitimate goals of the city.
And
we
know
understand
that you
that.
have slope issues.
Yeah.
So we can work those out through a variance.
Yeah, we'll deal, well,
Similar to the other.
as a lawyer, I always get nervous when somebody uses the word variance, and I'm sure Kevin does as well, but we'll deal with it with appropriate, we'll deal with it with appropriate provisions in the development agreement.
We'll identify opportunities for
Is
improvement.
there exceptions?
I
Yeah.
call it a permitted exception.
Yes,
Call it
we'll
a
come up with
permitted
some
exception.
clever phraseology for it.
Well, Nate, while we're parting with smiles, is there anything else you need?
No, we appreciate your time. Thank you.
How did you
Perfect.
start early? Brian and I both left.
I'm like, hey,
We left Salt Lake early to get here for 7 o'clock.
We were last on the agenda. I told you, they're gonna go fast.
I know, but you said
They're gonna go
7.
fast. I don't think they're gonna start before 7, but they might. They
Bruce,
did.
you're extending the meeting. I'm just saying. Good point, we're
Thank
done.
you.
Kevin, he must be an attorney too.
I'm done. That last 1 minute doesn't count.
Perfect. Thanks. Thank you very much. Okay, do we have a need for closed session?
Mark,
Yeah, we do, I believe. Kevin,
I move.
you have some items?
I'll
They're
second.
checking to see if we even need it.
Hold on.
Wait,
Let's
Okay.
punt.
No?
No closed session.
Are you sure? Because
Brief.
You might see it.
Do you want to do it?
Yeah,
I move that we go into closed session.
Okay.
Second.
2 minutes.
First and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
For 2 minutes, yep.
Okay.
That would be-
2 minutes. Motion
would-
passes
You have to
unanimously.
do roll call now.
Oh, that's right. Porter? Aye. Podesta?
Aye.
Wheeldon?
Aye.
McComber?
Aye.
Barch?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Yeah, please.
He didn't have my mic turned on, so I was.
Kara.
It is on.
It is now. He didn't have it when.
Just wanted to touch my microphone.
What?
You just wanted to touch my microphone.
Yeah, pretty much.
Is he